Could I ask first, this gentleman over here ask his question, because he had his hand up quite a bit, but...
Oh, it's very gracious of him. I'm sorry if I missed it.
No?
Yeah, go ahead.
I wanted to comment really on Douglas's point about the laws being okay. And I think this is a repeat of actually the issues leading up to the Civil War in the 17th century. That the king regarded his rights to, he said, trust us, you know, give me absolute power and I will devolve it well and hone it on people. The reality was very different. That his government was incompetent, people were arbitrarily arrested. And that is the natural end state of these laws that Labour has created over the last 12 years. And we must revisit those laws from an Anglo-Saxon legalistic point of view and actually say, no, let's get the laws right, let's restrict CCTV to where it's appropriate. Let's not trust bureaucrats to interpret that, because they never will.
I agree, and this comes back to what I mentioned about the sunset clause. It's like we did, for instance, there could be a compliment in Alex and myself on this issue. For instance, CCTV that have been areas that have not ever proved to be of any use, which has been costly, willfully costly, and has never helped to solve any crime or anything like that, would have to be revisited and could be taken down. In other words, for these laws to work, they have to be revisited. It's certainly true that the Labour government, I have to say, with the in many cases very little opposition, has been able to push through legislation in recent years, which has been quite unbelievably shocking, and which is shown as such when it arrives in court. But I just very quickly on that, about Alex mentioned, we have to decide who we are as a nation. I think one of the ways we have to do this is to also fundamentally readdress the language in which we talk about things. I made an allusion at the very beginning to this case of the 121-7 bonders who came out of the flat saying, I know my rights. It strikes me that the conservative side of the argument has something to add to this, and I think it does. It has to be in part not taking on all of the language of conservatism's opponents. I've said quite a lot recently about this in relation to, for instance, George Osborne's demos speech and so on, this adoption of New Labour's language. I think conservatives have to be very careful about taking on the language of their opponents in relation to rights and so on. And actually have to ask, again, fairly fundamental questions about what rights we really believe in protecting in our society to keep it liberal in the real sense, and which rights are no such thing.
All I would add to that, and I think I suppose, because I agree with the premise of the question, my answer is brief. Don't trust the king. It is a general rule in any liberal society. And of course, even though you may have a good king now, you may in 20 years' time not have a good king. And that's why you don't want to grant in perpetuity powers to your king or executive or whatever you're governed by. The temporary suspension of the rule of law in times of great crisis may be a necessary evil, but the indefinite continuation of it is just an evil. You've got to ask, when will that time come to an end? Gentlemen.
I'll ask my question now. We're talking about the current situation under Labour, and we're looking like a little bit into the future when the Conservatives become the government. It's going to be quicker if I just read this straight off this sheet of paper, if you don't mind. As a Conservative Brit blogger, I've just put a scenario to readers. With the green light for the European superstate the Irish have just ushered in, the next May when the Tories become the government, what precisely will they become the government of? England will have effectively ceased to exist. The regions such as Yorkshire Forward will control all functions of government. Westminster will essentially be reduced to a rubber stamp. And my two questions are, what will the Conservative Party do to address this? Because there is a shifted power base, and how will they address civil liberties? And the second, how can the further erosion of civil liberties in the light of this scenario be prevented and reversed?
Well, of course, like probably most people sitting in this hall, I received an email from David Cameron saying we wouldn't be discussing the EU, so that's the answer to the first part. And on the second part, I think the EU, not least on civil liberties and information, is one of the major drivers in the loss of our privacy and the loss of our freedom. Next year, we will be circulating our information with the rest of European legal authorities. That's not just with Brussels, that's also with Bulgarians and Croatia from next year onwards. And everyone in those states entitled to, hundreds of thousands of people in each of the states, will be entitled to request your personal information, not just your criminal records, but other material held on databases to which law enforcement agencies in this country have access. So that is to say, and I suppose it's a delayed answer as well to gentleman's back, even if you do trust the British government to keep your DNA safe now, do you trust every government in Europe throughout perpetuity to retain that? I'm not sure I do, particularly, and I don't mean to be rude about our European friends, particularly some of those with close relations in the Balkans, to gangsterism, to out-and-out gangsterism, in which some towns are run by people involved in criminality. Anyway,
I'm not a member of the Conservative Party, so I can talk about the EU all day. And intention. No, I think it's a very, very important question. There's certain fatigue, I think, which comes across. I mentioned earlier about the whole sort of lack of excitement that people have about the CCTV footage issue in this country compared to America's. I think this comes back to, like so many really crucial issues which we discuss these days. There's a torpor of this whole thing. There's a sort of malaise, a sultry end of summer sort of somberness. I think there are reasons for this, and I think that Europe is one of them, one of the biggest. People don't get all that excited about issues because they know there's very little they can do about them anymore. They don't get all that excited about the loss of quite a small liberty, like the liberty not to be photographed naked by your local councillor. Because some of the much bigger issues are way beyond their control and way beyond their say-so. And I mention this as I suppose, a critical, someone who's critical of the Conservative Party and indeed the Labour Party. But as someone who's critical of the Conservative Party, I mention this simply for the following reason, which is that it is no good for the Conservative Party to come into power and tinker. They must come in to pull down, swing the axe. Now, I know that there will be no desire to do this, and I know there will be no leadership to do this, and no competence actually to do this. Many of the most important decisions we should be able to make about ourselves, we are no longer able to make. And until we have a leadership and a party in power, explaining to the people before coming to power what they will do when they have power, very little can be done, and we will simply continue to be rather like those sort of wasps I still get in my flat still, who they're just about to die, but dozily wandering around the windowsill, looking for some kind of small fight. We really have very, very significant questions in this country about our future, and they are not being addressed. I cannot believe it, because it is like watching a people volunteering up every right whilst quibbling over silly little things.
I'm slightly more optimistic